Hello, this is a first introduction on how to program with C# in Visual Studio. There will be many new words and concepts to learn, and today we will talk about classes, how they are constructed, about components like text boxes and buttons and their properties, about naming convention. We will talk more about that later, but today we will start with camel case and also tell how we should prefix our components on the form. We will look at how we can switch between design view, where we design our user interface, and code view, where we design our code. And we will also talk about events and how we detect events like mouse clicks and mouse hover, etc. And how we can write simple event handlers to handle the events. We will also look at a few of the help functions inside Visual Studio, like IntelliSense and code error detection. That helps us when we are writing our code. Let's open Visual Studio and create a new project. We will create a Visual C# project, a Windows project, and it will be a Windows Forms application. And then we go down here to give it a name. I name it Starting C# Programming and click OK. Then the project will be created. The first thing I advise you to do is to go to Save All. To save your project, then you can select a folder with this browse button, and it selects the name we wrote earlier. So here I can just click OK to save it, and we start the program in design view, so we can expand this one a bit, and then we can design our user interface. Even though this is an empty form, there will be lots of automatically created code behind the scenes. If we click the F7 button, it will bring us over to the code view. Alternatively, we can go to View in the menu and click Code. We see that it's F7 button. I will give a short explanation of what this automatically generated code means, but a deeper understanding of this will be achieved later in the course. For now, we will only have a quick glance at it to understand why it's there. Using is an instruction for importing namespaces to our project. Namespaces is a way of organizing code elements like classes and methods into a library structure. The reason why is to be able to reuse code in other projects. Lots of namespaces are already included in .NET available to our code. The most common namespaces, which includes often used classes and methods, are automatically imported to our projects. That's the reason why all these using statements are listed here. If we take a look at the rest of the code, we will see that this is organized as a namespace. We can build our own namespaces and reuse them in other projects. Notice also how C# separates its different modules in the structure by enclosing them with curly brackets. The outermost brackets are enclosing the code for the namespace. The brackets inside these identify our class, and the inner brackets enclosing the code part of a method within the class. Be sure to always end the curly bracket when the code module ends, or else an error will occur. Here we have a class named form1, and we also have a method named form1, which tells me that this is a constructor method. Every class has at least one constructor method, but it can also have more. Every constructor has to be given the same name as the class, but its set of parameters will differ. The colon after class form1 tells me that form1 inherits some of its code from another class, here named form. Inheritance is not a subject in this course. A constructor is executed automatically when the program starts. They are used to initialize code elements. In this case, a method named initializeComponents will be called and run, in which, amongst other things, the components on the form will be given names, backcolors, size, etc., in accordance to our specifications in the Properties window in Design mode. The code in this method that we are calling here is normally hidden for us, but we can go to Solution Explorer, and here under form1.cs we will also find form1 designer. So if I double click on this one, then I will see some hidden code, and here Windows Form Designer generated code. If I click this plus sign, I will see this code, and here I see the method that is called initializeComponent. And this will create the form that we see here in design view. When the program runs, this form will be created, and if we have buttons, text boxes, etc. on this one, This will also be created by this initialize component method. But for now we can close this and go back to our code. If you want other kinds of initializations, we can just write our code after this statement. And after this public form 1, we can write the rest of our code. Now we're going to create a graphical user interface for our application. We start with an empty form like we see here in the design view. We will see that the header of form 1 is named form 1. That means that form 1's text property has the value form 1. We can see this in the properties windows. If we scroll down to the text property, here we see form 1. We will change the value of this text property to hello world. So I write hello world and click enter. And then I will see that the text in my form has changed from form 1 to hello world. We want to add some components to the form. We will make a program where the user can click on a button and then some text will be written to a text box. We will also manipulate some other properties than the text property, like changing the background color of the components. For this program we need one button and one text box. I will find a button in the toolbox to the left. One can either drag and drop the component onto the form, or one can just double click on it and it will automatically be pasted onto the form, like this. Instead of scrolling here to look for a component, we can also search for it. If I write text, then I will get all the components with a text in its name, and we can take this text box and now I can drag and drop it here and expand it a bit. If you want a multi-line text box, then we can click on this arrow and select multi-line, and then we will be able to make it higher. The next thing we will do is to name the components. Naming the components is important because we need to be able to address the components in the code when we want to change their properties, values, etc. The naming convention that will be used in this course is to begin every component name with a 3-letter prefix, like you see here, so that one easily can separate the different kinds of components from each other in the code. Remember that C# is case sensitive. That means that we have to be aware that a name in uppercase is not the same name as a name in lowercase, even if they're spelled just the same. Here we see some examples. These 3 names will be interpreted as 3 different variable names. 3-letter prefixes will always be spelled with small letters. For the rest of the name we use camel case notation. That means that we start each new word with an uppercase letter if the name is composed of several words, like we see here with the red colored letters. The uppercase letters become humps, just like humps on a camel, and that's why it's called camel case. Never use spaces or special characters in these kind of names, and use English language for all your code elements. The prefix for a text box is txt, and for a button btn, and for a label lbl. And there are lots of other components with their own set of prefixes. The part after the prefix should be a descriptive name that describes clearly what the component's function is. Like we see here, btn show text in text box, txt show message. We will now go to design view and name our button and our text box. Click one time on the button, and then in the properties window down to the right, locate the name. Then change the name to btn show. And then click enter and repeat the same procedure for the text box. Click once on it and give this component the name txt show. Now we will be able to address these 2 components in our code. Then we're going to have a look at some of the components' properties. If I click once on the button, I can see the button's properties in the properties window. I can see that it has lots of properties. We will have a look at a few of them. We can scroll categorized, or we can scroll alphabetically. I prefer alphabetically. Scroll down to the letter B and select the back color property. Every property can be given a value, and the back color can be given values like blue, green, yellow, red, and so on. I will give it the value red. I select a window here and write red and click enter. And now I see that the background color of the text box has changed to red. Alternatively, we can pick from the list of colors that we find here, dark orange, or we can specify the RGB code, which means that we can specify the amount of red, green and blue, each given by a number between 0 and 255. Then the values must be separated with semicolons. We can try this by writing, for instance, 23, 45, 100 and click enter. And now I see that it changed to dark blue. If I change the blue part of it, 100 to 255, enter, we see that it gets more of the blue color. I will choose a light color, so I just pick one of these from the palette. Size is another property, and here we see that you can change the size, the width and the height of the component. So if I change this to 400, I see that the width is expanding. And if I drag this component and make it not so wide, then we see the width is changed down here. Those two are of course corresponding. Initially we changed this text property of value of form1 to hello world, and now I want to change the text on the button so that it don't says button 1 but show text. So we will rename the text property value of this button to show text. I click once on it and go to the text property and write show text, enter. I see that this has been the text on the button. We can run our program to test it by clicking the start button or the F5 button. Then I will see that my program runs with the initial values that have been given to the component's properties through the properties windows. But when I click on the button, nothing will happen. What I want to happen is that when somebody clicks this button, a text shall be written to the text box. At the same time, I want the background colors of the components to change to some other colors, for instance blue or yellow. We are going to program that. First we will stop our program, and that we can do by clicking this X button. If this don't work, we can always click this stop debugging button in Visual Studio. So if your program, for instance, run in an infinite loop or something, then you will not be able to use this. Then try this one. What we want to happen is that when the program is running and somebody clicks this show text button, then we will have some text to appear in this text box. There are two steps in this process. First, a click event for the button has to be detected. When a user clicks on a button, an event is detected by the system, and the system knows which component that triggered the event. This will be detected by some automatically generated code, which is hidden for us. Second, when an event is detected, the hidden code element will point to an event handler in our code. There we can write our own code that specifies what we want the program to do when the event occurs. This code is named an event handler. It will handle the event. There are lots of different kinds of events, like click events, double click events, mouse hover, mouse leave, text changed, etc. All which can be detected by the system. We want to write a click event for the button. When we double click on a button in design view, the default thing that happens is that a code shell for a click event handler automatically is created by Visual Studio. Let's double click on the button to see what happens. Here we can see the event handler is created, and this is a click event handler for the button named btn show. When the program is running and a mouse click on the button is detected, the program will jump to this code and execute it. We want our program to change the text in the text box, and the way to do that is to address the text box we have named txt show. So I write txt, and here we see something. Visual Studio comes with a suggestion to what the name of the text box will be. And here it writes txt show. And this function is called IntelliSense, and that means that Visual Studio will help us while we're coding and make suggestions to what we are going to write. Instead of fulfill this name now, I can just click the tab key and it will fulfill it for me. This is also a good reason for prefixing the component names, so that IntelliSense, for instance, will list all our text box names as soon as we write txt. You can see here, if I write btn, I will see all my buttons come up in this list. But now we want txt show, and when we have addressed the text box, then we can write dot, and we will get a list of all the properties, events, and methods that are available for this component. You will see that these have different icons. A property, for instance, has this spanner tool as an icon. A method will be illustrated with a cube, and an event will be illustrated by a lightning. We will change the text property, which is the visual text on a component. So I write a T, and then it jumps down to T here, and I click the tabulator key when text is selected. That will fill it in. Then we will use an equal sign to assign a value to the property. So an equal sign does not mean in this case that the value on the left side is equal to the value on the right side. It's not a comparison, but it is an assignment. So it means that the value that we write on the right side will be assigned to the property on the left side. In our case, the value will be hello world, which means that we assign this value hello world to the text property of the component named txt show. And then this text will be shown in this text box. We see a red mark at the end of the statement. This is because all statements in C# must end with a semicolon. In the lower part of Visual Studio window, down here, we can see an arrow list. If you don't find it, choose View and Arrow List from the top menu. This arrow says that the semicolon is expected. We can double click on the arrow in the arrow list, and Visual Studio will move the cursor to the place in the code where the error was found. Correct the error and the red marker will disappear. So I put in a semicolon and then the error disappears. What will happen now is that when the program is run and somebody clicks the button named btn show, then the program will jump to this part of the code and run it, execute it, and hello world will then be assigned to the text property, to the text box named txt show, and will be shown in the text box. We will try to run it. To run the program, we click either the start button or the F5 button. So I click the F5 button. My program starts, I click the show text button, and I see that the value hello world is assigned to the text property and will be shown in this component. And then I close my program. And in this event handler, I can add more code if I want. Maybe I want to change the background color of the text box and the button when somebody clicks the button. Then I have to add some code to this event handler. I can write txt show, and then I have the component, and I want to change this component's back color. Then I add dot and the back color. And I can set the back color of the text box to yellow. First I have to write color, because all the colors are defined in the class named color. And then I can write or select a color here. So I write yellow and semicolon. If I also want to change the back color of the button when the button is clicked, then I can address the button, which is named btn show, and dot back color, and I can give it the back color light blue. Color dot light blue. So now I can click the F5 button to run my program again to see the change. I click on the show text button, and then I see that this back color of the text box is changed to yellow and the back color of the button is changed to blue. So that worked. All this happens when the event handler is run, and that happens when we click the button. Before we end this session, I want to add another button, and when somebody clicks that button, I want the text here to be removed and the colors of these two components to be restored to its original colors. We can close this running project. I'll go back to design view and add a new button. So I can go to the toolbox here and start writing button. I double click on it. I can put it here. And I want to have another text on it, so I go down to the properties window, and the text will be restore values, and I want to name my component, so I go to the name part, and as we learned earlier, we use the btn prefix for buttons, and restore values, enter. And now I want to write the click event handler for this button. So then in design view, I double click on it, and we see the shell of this event handler. And I want to remove the text from txt show. So I write txt show.text, assign the value an empty text string. So if I don't have anything between these quotes, then the text that will be written is just an empty string. That means nothing, and then the text will be removed. And I want to restore the original colors of both the components. So the first component was the text box and its back color. To restore the back color to its original colors, we can use a keyword named default and just add color, which is the class that contains all the colors. You can put it like this. We will do the same with the button, btn show, and its back color will also be assigned the default value, and that means the original value it had before we changed its colors. So now we can click the F5 button to run the program again, and we click on the show text to write the text hello world and change the back color of both the components. And now I click the restore values, and we see the original colors are restored. In fact, you can see that the default colors differs a bit from the colors used on the original buttons, but that doesn't matter. Except from that, our program is working as expected. So then we finish the program, click on the X button, and I go to save all and save my project. Be sure to do that, and then we finish this video.